I deleted every picture of her from my phone in under a minute. It was easier than I thought. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just tap, delete, confirm. A few months ago, I would have struggled. Now, it felt like clearing out junk I should have thrown away years ago. My name is Richard Ellis, 61 years old, retired Marine officer, now making a living as an international negotiator. I've spent a lifetime talking hostile men out of bad decisions, keeping peace between those who'd rather settle their disputes with bullets. I thought I understood people. I thought I understood her. Turns out, I was wrong. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Evelyn had left that morning on a business trip, Chicago, supposedly. Normally, I wouldn't have questioned it. I trusted her, or at least, I trusted the routine. But trust is just another way of saying you stopped paying attention. And I wasn't making that mistake again. I sat in my study, a glass of bourbon untouched beside me, my laptop open to the email I had read 3 times already. A credit card alert, flagged as unusual activity. A 5-star hotel, one I knew she wouldn't have booked alone. The timestamp told me everything I needed to know. She was supposed to be in a meeting. Instead, she was checking in. It didn't take much to confirm. A little digging, a couple of phone calls under the right pretense. Daniel Marks, financial consultant. Smooth talker, from what I gathered. Not a bad-looking guy. That didn't bother me. What got me was the arrogance. The kind of man who thought he was smarter than the people he was screwing over. I'd dealt with men like him before. They all made the same mistake. They underestimated patience. I heard a car pull into the driveway. My sister. I knew Judy would show up the second she caught wind that something was off. She always did. She barely waited for me to open the door. "So," she said, stepping inside. Eyes sharp, coat still on. "You're really gonna sit here and pretend everything's fine?" I exhaled through my nose, shutting the door behind her. "I'm handling it." Judy gave me a look, the same one she'd given me when I was 17 and got caught sneaking into the house past curfew. "Handling it? Rick, you find out your wife's screwing some hotshot consultant, and you're sitting here in the dark like some grieving widow? Where's the fire?" I smirked. "You want me to go punch a hole in the drywall? Maybe drive to the hotel and drag the guy out by his tie?" "If that's what it takes," she shot back, folding her arms. "What I don't want is you pretending this is just another negotiation." I poured myself a drink, finally taking a slow sip before answering. "It is a negotiation, Judy. She just doesn't know she's already lost." Judy studied me for a moment, her stance shifting. She wasn't used to seeing me like this, calm. It threw her off. "So what's the plan?" I sat down, tapping a folder on my desk. "First, I gather intel. I don't make a move without knowing every angle. Second, I make sure she can't talk her way out of it. No denials, no excuses. Just cold, hard proof." Judy sighed, shaking her head. "Jesus, you're scary when you're like this." I shrugged. I've spent my career making sure powerful men don't get away with bad decisions. I don't see why my own wife should be any different. She let out a short laugh, but I saw the approval in her eyes. "Well, as long as you're not about to turn into some sad sack waiting for an apology, I'm with you." "Not waiting for anything," I assured her. "She's the one who doesn't know what's coming." She nodded. "All right, let me know when it's time to twist the knife." After she left, I turned back to my laptop. I had more work to do. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was emotional, messy. I was aiming for something cleaner. Final. I gave myself 48 hours before making a move. 2 days to observe, confirm, and prepare. I had no intention of storming into the house and demanding answers like some fool begging for the truth. That was for men who still wanted to believe their wives could be reasoned with. I wasn't interested in her explanations. I wanted results. Evelyn got home late, rolling her suitcase inside like nothing had changed. She was wearing a navy blazer, the one she always picked for big presentations. Her hair was styled the same way, makeup done just right. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she'd spent the last 2 days in boardrooms and hotel lobbies, exhausted from meetings. But I did know better. "Long day?" I asked from the kitchen, my voice even. She barely looked at me. "Brutal. Client meetings ran late, flight got delayed. I need a shower." She moved to walk past me, and I let her. She was good at this. Clean, professional lies delivered with just the right amount of exhaustion to keep anyone from asking questions. It made me wonder how many times she'd done it before. I let her disappear upstairs before grabbing my phone and stepping outside onto the back patio. The night air was crisp, quiet, the way I liked it. I dialed the number Grace had given me that afternoon. A deep voice answered after 2 rings. "You got something for me?" "More than enough," I said, taking a slow breath. Surveillance confirmed the meetings weren't real. Transactions match up with hotel stays. He paid for the room. The man on the other end exhaled sharply. "Sloppy. Rookie mistakes." "He thinks he's untouchable," I said. "And she thinks she's in control." He let out a low chuckle. "You want me to move forward with the audit?" "Do it," I said. "Make sure he feels it. Consider it done." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket, watching the streetlights flicker down the road. This was just the first step. Daniel Marks was about to find out what it felt like to lose control, and Evelyn, well, she was about to realize the man she married wasn't the kind to let things slide. Inside, she was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone, her expression unreadable. When she saw me, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "You okay?" she asked, her tone light. "You've been quiet." I took my time answering, stepping over to grab a bottle of water from the fridge. "Long day." She nodded, sipping her wine. "Same." It was almost amusing. How easily she could stand there, knowing what she'd done, pretending nothing had changed. I wondered if she ever planned to tell me, if she even felt guilty, or if she'd convinced herself that whatever she was doing didn't really count. It didn't matter. She wasn't getting away with it. I leaned against the counter across from her, studying her carefully. "I was thinking," I said casually, "maybe we should have dinner with your parents soon. It's been a while." Her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her glass, the only indication of discomfort. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "Yeah, maybe. We'll have to check schedules." That was the first crack. Small, but there. She was already trying to buy time. She had no idea that I wasn't giving her any. The invitation went out the next morning. A formal dinner. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet evening at Donovan's, an upscale steakhouse in the city where serious people had serious conversations. I made sure it sounded routine, something I'd normally suggest. Evelyn wouldn't suspect a thing. She responded with a casual "sounds good" over text, which told me 2 things. 1, she still believed she was in control. And 2, she wasn't planning on telling me anything. That was fine. I wasn't expecting honesty. By the time the reservation was confirmed, the guest list was set: Evelyn's parents, her younger brother, my sister Judy, and, of course, Daniel Marks. He didn't know yet, but I'd made sure his assistant put the dinner on his calendar under the pretense of a high-profile networking opportunity. The kind of thing a guy like him wouldn't miss. Judy called me that afternoon. "This is a hell of a setup," she said. "You sure you don't just want to hit the guy in the face and be done with it?" "Too easy," I said, scrolling through my notes. "And not nearly as effective." She snorted. "You always did have a taste for precision." "Fine. I'll be there, front row, popcorn ready." The night of the dinner, I arrived early. Donovan's had the kind of dim lighting and polished mahogany that made every conversation feel important. I picked a table in the center of the room, open, impossible to leave unnoticed. The kind of place where a person couldn't just slip away when things got uncomfortable. Evelyn showed up 5 minutes late, her usual brand of calculated tardiness. She was dressed sharp, a dark blazer over a fitted dress, heels clicking against the floor as she walked in. She greeted her parents with a warm smile, kissed my cheek lightly, and settled in like nothing was wrong. I let it play out. Small talk. Work updates. Her father complaining about the latest politics. Everything moving along just fine until Daniel arrived. He walked in with that same confidence I'd seen in his photos, a man used to shaking hands and closing deals, completely unaware that he was the one being sold out tonight. His eyes skimmed the table, landing on Evelyn for a fraction of a second too long before shifting to me. I didn't react. I didn't need to. Evelyn's hand tightened slightly on her wine glass. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. Daniel forced an easy grin, stepping forward to shake my hand. "Richard Ellis," he said. "Been meaning to meet you. Evelyn speaks highly of you." I met his grip, firm and steady. She does have a way with words. The waiter arrived, took drink orders, and the conversation drifted back into the safe zone. I let it. I let them think this was just another dinner. Let them believe they had time. Then, when the steaks arrived, I set my fork down and leaned back slightly. "So, Daniel," I said, my tone casual, "how's business these days? Heard you've been under some scrutiny." His knife paused for half a second before slicing through the fillet. "Nothing major," he said smoothly. "Routine checks. It happens in my field." I nodded, sipping my bourbon. Sure. But an IRS audit isn't exactly routine, is it? Evelyn's posture stiffened just enough to notice. Daniel, to his credit, kept his expression neutral. It's a nuisance, he admitted, but nothing I can't handle. I smiled. Good to hear. Must be tough, though. All those expenses under review. Travel, hotels. I imagine they'll be looking at every detail. The table went silent. Evelyn's mother glanced between us, sensing something was off. Daniel set his fork down, his easy demeanor slipping just slightly. I'm sorry, he said, feigning confusion. Is there something you're getting at? I tilted my head slightly. I just find it interesting, I said, keeping my voice even. How a man in your position, under an audit, might struggle to explain certain transactions. Like, say, repeated hotel bookings that don't quite match up with the clients you claim to be meeting. Evelyn exhaled sharply, setting her glass down with just a little too much force. Rick. I held up a hand. Let him answer. Daniel glanced at Evelyn now, something unspoken passing between them. I let the moment stretch, let the weight settle in. No escape, no room for backpedaling. Her father cleared his throat, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. Evelyn, he said slowly, his voice firm, what is this about? She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it across the table. Go ahead, I said. Open it. Evelyn hesitated. Daniel, on the other hand, looked like a man who already knew he'd lost. Judy smirked from her seat, watching the scene unfold like a front-row spectator at a prize fight. Evelyn finally picked up the envelope, pulled out the printed copies, hotel invoices, timestamps, photos. Everything laid out in black and white. No denials, no room for spin. Just the truth, sitting there under the restaurant's soft lighting for everyone to see. Her mother inhaled sharply, pressing a hand to her lips. Her father's face darkened. Daniel stayed silent, his jaw clenched, his fingers tightening around his glass. Evelyn exhaled slowly, setting the papers down with careful precision. She didn't look at me. You planned this, she said, her voice low. I shrugged, picking up my drink. I negotiate for a living, Evelyn. You should know by now. I never walk into a room without leverage. Evelyn sat there, her face blank, the silence stretching longer than she wanted it to. She was calculating, deciding on her next move. I could see it in the slight twitch of her jaw, the way her fingers tapped once against the table before she pulled them back into her lap. Daniel, on the other hand, wasn't as composed. He exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat like a man desperate to find an exit. Her father was the first to speak, his voice low, tight, with barely contained anger. Evelyn, tell me this isn't what it looks like. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. I knew why. She wasn't the kind of person to beg for forgiveness. She was looking for an angle, an explanation she could control. But there wasn't one. Not this time. Her mother looked mortified, eyes darting between the papers, and Evelyn like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. My God, she whispered. How long? Evelyn let out a slow breath, finally sitting back. She wasn't going to deny it, not with the evidence staring her in the face. Does it really matter? She asked, her voice calm, even. Her father's expression darkened. It matters to me. Daniel pushed back slightly from the table, like he was ready to leave, but I wasn't done with him. Stay, I said, voice firm. You started this. You don't get to walk away just because it's uncomfortable now. He glanced at Evelyn, waiting for her lead. He was used to her being in control, running the show. But she didn't speak up for him. She didn't even look at him. That was all I needed to see. Judy let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking her head. Jesus, Evelyn. You always did think you were the smartest one in the room. Evelyn turned her gaze to my sister, her posture still perfectly composed. You don't get to judge me. Judy smirked. No? Well, I'm doing it anyway. Her father wasn't done. His grip tightened around the edge of the table, his knuckles white. And Daniel, how dare you sit at this table, shaking my hand, pretending to be some respectable businessman while screwing around with my daughter behind her husband's back. Daniel finally spoke, his voice tight. Mr. Irwin, Shut up, her father snapped. I don't want to hear a damn thing from you. Daniel closed his mouth. Smart choice. I let the weight of the moment settle before I spoke again. You had a good thing, Evelyn. A damn good thing. But you threw it away for what? A couple of business trips and a man who won't even defend you when the walls close in. She lifted her chin slightly, that old defiance flickering back into place. I don't regret my choices. I nodded, leaning forward. Good. Because neither do I. She knew what that meant. She wasn't stupid. She'd spent our entire marriage watching me negotiate, watching me build strategies, outmaneuver opponents. Now she was the opponent, and she knew I never left a fight without securing my victory. I set my napkin down on the table, my voice calm, final. We're done. She stared at me, eyes unreadable, lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the gears turning in her head, but I wasn't going to give her the space to figure out an argument. There wasn't one left to make. I turned my attention back to Daniel. And you hope you've got good accountants, because that audit? It's only the beginning. He swallowed hard, his face pale. He knew I had the resources to make his life hell. And I would. I stood, adjusting my jacket, my movements slow, deliberate. Enjoy your dinner, I said, before walking away. Judy was right behind me, shaking her head as we stepped outside into the cool night air. That was brutal. I exhaled, hands in my pockets. It needed to be. She smirked, looking back toward the restaurant. They're still sitting there, probably trying to figure out what the hell just happened. I shrugged. Doesn't matter. By the time they do, it'll be too late. Judy sighed, crossing her arms. You gonna be okay? I glanced at her, then back toward the street, where my car waited. I already am. I didn't go home that night. There was nothing waiting for me there except the echo of a life I was done with. Instead, I drove out of the city, took the long roads that cut through open fields and quiet stretches of highway. I kept the windows down, let the cold air bite at my skin, kept the radio low. It felt good to be moving, to put distance between myself and everything I just walked away from. By the time I reached Montana, the sun was just starting to rise over the mountains. My cabin sat near a lake, tucked away from everything. No neighbors, no noise, just clean air and space to think. I hadn't been here in months, but it still felt like mine. The kind of place where a man could breathe. I tossed my bag on the couch, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and stepped out onto the deck. The water was still, untouched by wind, the surface reflecting the trees in perfect symmetry. A man could stand out here long enough, and the world stopped feeling complicated. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I let it ring twice before answering. You really just vanished? Judy's voice was sharp, but not angry. I told you I was done, I said, taking a sip of coffee. Didn't see much reason to stick around. She snorted. Yeah, well, you missed the fun part. Word got around fast. Evelyn's firm is scrambling. Daniel's been in meetings with his lawyers all week, and Mom called me 3 times just to ask if you were okay. I leaned against the railing, watching the mist roll off the lake. I'm fine. There was a pause. Are you? I exhaled slowly. Better than I was yesterday. She didn't push. Good. Anyway, I'm coming up there next weekend. Make sure you haven't turned into some mountain hermit. I'll stock up on beer. She laughed. Damn right you will. See you soon. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The world kept moving, just like it always did. A few days passed, each one quieter than the last. I woke early, ran along the trails, spent my afternoons reading or working on things I'd put off. I wasn't healing, because I hadn't been wounded. I was just shifting, moving into whatever came next. Grace called on a Wednesday evening. I hadn't expected her to. Hey, she said, her voice softer than usual. You doing okay? I sat down on the porch steps, looking out at the trees. Yeah, just getting some space. She hesitated. I figured. Just wanted to check in. Office feels different without you. I smirked. Quieter, I bet. She laughed. A little, but not better. I didn't say anything. She didn't either, for a second. Well, she finally said, just know that. If you need anything, I'm here. I know, I said, meaning it. She didn't push. Just gave a quiet goodbye, and then the line went dead. I set the phone down, leaned back, and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something I needed to plan. It just felt like something I was ready to step into. I stayed in Montana longer than I planned. There was no rush to get back. The city could wait. The phone calls, the emails, the people who wanted to check in or get a piece of the story, they could all wait too. Out here, there was no fallout to manage, no whispers behind my back, no lingering looks from people who thought they understood my life better than I did. Just the steady rhythm of the days, the clean bite of cold air in the mornings, the sound of the lake moving against the shore. Judy showed up that Saturday, like she said she would. She pulled up in a rental SUV, got out, stretched, and looked around like she was evaluating a mission site. Well, she said, hands on her hips. At least you didn't grow a beard and start talking to trees. I smirked, stepping down from the porch. Give it a few more weeks. She glanced past me toward the cabin. Looks good. Feels like you, actually. You should have been out here years ago. I grabbed one of her bags from the car. Maybe. We spent the afternoon catching up, sitting out on the deck, drinking beer while she filled me in on everything I'd missed. Evelyn was keeping a low profile, doing damage control at work. Daniel, as expected, was dealing with more than just an audit now. Turns out, he had more skeletons in his closet than just an affair, and the right people were starting to dig. He deserves whatever's coming, she said, stretching her legs out. And Evelyn? She's going to spend the rest of her life trying to rebuild what she wrecked. I nodded, watching the lake. Not my problem. Judy looked at me sideways. Damn. You really don't care, do you? I took a slow sip of my beer. Would it change anything if I did? She smirked. Guess not. That night, after she went to bed, I sat out on the porch, looking up at the sky. It was clear, filled with stars you couldn't see in the city. The kind of view that made a man feel small in the best way. Like nothing that happened down here really mattered in the grand scheme of things. My phone buzzed next to me. Grace again. You ever coming back? I smirked, typing back. You keeping my seat warm? A few seconds later. Maybe. But I make a terrible negotiator. I leaned back, looking at the message for a moment before setting the phone down. I wasn't in a rush to answer. The city would still be there when I was ready. I didn't know exactly what came next, but for the first time in a long time, that didn't bother me. Some things weren't worth saving, and some endings weren't losses. They were just the start of something else. I didn't go back to DC right away. The city had too many familiar places, too many people who thought they knew my story. I wasn't interested in their opinions. So I took my time. Spent another month in Montana, fixing up the cabin, making it into something more than just a place to hide out. Something that was mine. One afternoon, I got a call from an old colleague. A quiet invitation to an event overseas, an exclusive diplomatic summit in Geneva, the kind of place where real deals were made behind closed doors. The kind of place where a man like me still had value. You're still respected, Rick, he said. More than you think. I looked out at the lake, considering. I'll think about it. That night, I did. Not just about Geneva, but everything. The way my life had reset, the things I'd left behind. I thought about Evelyn, about how she was probably still trying to salvage her reputation, holding meetings, smoothing things over, convincing herself she hadn't lost everything. But she had. Because power isn't about money or connections. It's about control. And she had none left. I thought about Daniel Marks. The last I heard, the audit had turned into a full-fledged investigation. Clients were backing away. Lawsuits were lining up. The kind of downfall that didn't happen overnight but hit like a slow, relentless storm. He'd learn, eventually. Every decision has consequences. I checked my phone before turning in for the night. One new email from Grace. Short, to the point. If you're done pretending you don't belong in the real world, you know where to find me. I smirked, shaking my head. She always knew when to push. 2 weeks later, I walked into a conference hall in Geneva, shaking hands with men who still spoke my language. Deals were being made, disputes being settled, and I was right where I belonged, at the table, in control. During a break, I stepped outside to the terrace, looking out over the city, the mountains standing tall in the distance. I felt no regret, no anger, no bitterness, just a clear understanding of what I had, what I'd lost, and what I'd gained. A familiar voice came from behind me. So you're alive. I turned. Grace stood there, arms crossed, eyes sharp as ever. I took a sip of my drink. Disappointed? She smirked. Not yet. I glanced back at the view, the lights of Geneva stretching out below us. You were right, you know. She raised an eyebrow. About what? That I wasn't done. She tilted her head, studying me for a second. Good. Because I was getting real tired of waiting. I laughed, shaking my head. For the first time in a long time, the weight was gone. Some men spend their whole lives chasing justice, trying to fix things that can't be fixed. I wasn't one of them. I played the game, I took my losses, and I walked away stronger. Evelyn was in my past. Daniel was a cautionary tale. And me? I was already moving forward,